Hello friends, welcome back to my channel in which I'm reviewing all of Elton John's studio albums. Today I'm looking at the Elton John album which came out in 1970, over 50 years old now. This was Elton's second album following on from Empty Sky and preceding Tumbleweed Connection. Now, we do know that the album was well received because AllMusic gave it 4.5 stars, and Rolling Stone magazine included it at number 468 in its 500 greatest albums of all time. But was it supposed to be an album in the first place? Because producer Gus Dudgeon commented, "This is a collection of polished demos for other artists to consider recording." Well, maybe this legendary album, which is now, as we say, 50 years old, was never meant to be in the first place. Or what a tragedy that would have been. What we do know is that these songs have lasted over all that time. And in fact, in this classic live concert, if you're lucky enough to have this album, when Elton played with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, 6 of the 10 songs on this album were included in this memorable concert. Now, there was a reissue in 1995 with 3 more tracks, and there was a deluxe edition that came out in 2008, which had a bonus disc with extra piano demos and BBC session recordings on it. Also, I've got this album, as you may have, a recording of Elton on the 17th of November 1970, in which he also records a number of tracks from this Elton John album. So lots of opportunities to hear these tracks live, and they work really well live. There's a vast number of cast of characters for this album, mostly session musicians, so he hadn't got his own band together yet. And of course we have this massive orchestra as well, with composer Paul Buckmaster supplying the luscious arrangements for the songs on this album. Now, of course, we know that classic moment when Elton was handed this envelope in which were loads of pieces of paper with lyrics written on by Bernie Taupin, and a lot of them became the songs on this album. Rolling Stone magazine commented, "Rarely has any artist taken a quantum leap between their first and second LPs quite like Elton John." And yet the Elton we hear on this album is a very different Elton to the one that we saw in subsequent albums in the 1970s. What sort of artist was he trying to be? Well, he's almost like a balladeer on here, accompanied by this massive orchestra. Surely he could have expected that to continue throughout his career. And of course, we see his career moving downwards in a sense in terms of the number of musicians to maybe 4 or 5 musicians on stage with him. Still brilliant. It couldn't last like this, of course, unless he saw himself becoming kind of an Andy Williams type of balladeer or something. But it's an interesting stage in his development. One other thing about this is that the album came out in the week that the Beatles split up. And that's really significant because people were ready for a new sound, somebody new to follow. And Elton came along just at the right time. The other thing to note, of course, is that all the tracks were recorded live. So what you hear is what you actually get, no overlays afterwards. And that does tell you something about the quality of the musicians involved and the quality of the writing. Let's have a look at the booklet now, and as we can see there, Elton is looking very moody on the cover. And this is really before his sort of makeover, when he was kind of turned into a star. He's very natural looking here, quite introverted, and that's reflected in the music. What have we got inside? Well, we've got some quite impressive lettering and artwork here of its time. This is nicely presented. There's the lyrics, as we can see, going through there. Nothing extra there, but well done. In the centre there, we have some of the key musicians involved, looking pretty relaxed. More of that. We have some liner notes at the back there, lots of background information. Another picture of Elton looking a bit moody there, and then that's the same picture again on the back. Now, of course, when we hear this, we know where we're going. This is one of the most distinctive introductions in music history, I suppose, modern music history, I would have to say. This is, of course, Your Song. listed by Rolling Stone magazine as one of the greatest songs of all time. Gets into their top 500 of all time. What can I say about this track that hasn't already been said? Perhaps not too much, except that this was Elton's first major hit single. It reached the top 10 in the UK and the US. Why is it so successful? Well, I think the lyrics are key here. This is a conversational style of lyric. It's like one person talking to another. It's a little bit funny, that feeling inside. You can imagine somebody sitting down and saying that to you, how they're feeling. It's very natural. It's got an acoustic guitar, and it doesn't sound like a demo. It sounds like the finished thing. It's got this harp as well in the background. It's a simple song, it's a sublime song, and it's a timeless song. All these things work together to make it so memorable. When John Lennon heard it, he said this is the first new thing to happen since the Beatles. And he knew how to write a brilliant song, of course, and he knew how to recognise one as well. And this has lasted 50 years. I expect it to last another 100 years when people will still be sitting down to record it. So we know it's been covered many times, and I'm sure it'll be covered many times in the future. So my grading system for this. We go from 1 to 10. A couple of songs have got 0 from me, and I think there's not going to be any more getting 0. The only two I've put down with 0 are ones I really dislike a lot. Everything else for me has some merit in Elton's discography. So we've got the scale of 1 to 10. Your song has got to be Out of This World. It's a legendary track, and I've only awarded 10 twice before. So this is the third 10 I've given. I reserve it for the very best. Track number 2 is I Need You to Turn To, and Elton chose a harpsichord to accompany himself on this. Rather a strange choice of instrument, one might think, and perhaps very much of its time in the late 60s, early 70s. It gives it a kind of an ancient feel to this song. We've also got the harp there, so there's sort of medieval feel almost to it. Elton apparently was nervous about playing the harpsichord with the rest of the orchestra because there's a slight delay when you play it. So it's quite difficult to get the timing right. Well, obviously pulled that off really well. It's a tender love song. I need you to turn to when I act so blind. You're my guardian angel who keeps out the cold. Lovely lyrics from Bernie there, and the orchestration gives it a wonderful atmosphere. It's a first-person song. It's about one person needing another. It's one of those songs which transfers across the ages, and we could sing it to a loved one as well. So although it's quite a distinctive, unusual sound, I think it still works, and this one I'm going to rate as a good song, 6 out of 10. Track number 3 is Take Me to the Pilot. Elton uses his rocking voice for this, and there's some funky, jagged piano taking us in to a song which appears to be a lot of nonsense. Apparently, Bernie was very influenced by science fiction novels at the time, and a number of the songs on this record appear to have kind of fantasy science fiction related images. And he's admitted that they don't necessarily have any deeper meaning than that. And this could well be one of them. Take me to the pilot. It says, through a glass eye, your throne is the one danger zone. Well, it's just a lot of nonsense, isn't it? And you can read anything you like into that, of course. Who is the pilot? Did Bernie know? Well, possibly not. Anyway, what we have here is some staccato orchestral chords, a strong rocking theme all the way through. Actually, some really excellent bass I noticed on the refrain here. And particularly impressive entrance of the percussion on verse 2. Just pick this up. And some creative drumming there as well. So the session musicians really working well on this one. And the refrain itself has a memorable hook. I would say this is a superior early rocker with a strident fade out as well. And we know Elton used this a lot as a live track in his early recordings. So whereabouts does this come amongst his whole repertoire? I would say this is a good track, and I'm going to give it 6 marks out of 10. Track number 4 is No Shoestrings on Louise. Possibly intended as a homage to the Rolling Stones. It's about Louise searching for male prey. She goes to the church to pray for Lucifer. Elton's using kind of an American voice on this one. It's got a country feel to it and would almost be at home on the Tumbleweed Connection album. The refrain is fairly engaging, and there's a good chorus feel with backing vocals on this. The bass, if you listen out for that, is again impressive on this. Although perhaps we could say it's a slightly unremarkable song. And No Shoestrings on Louise. I was talking to somebody else about this. What does that actually mean to have no shoestrings? Send me your thoughts below. It's okay, this one, without being anything particularly memorable. It's an average track for me and gets 4 out of 10. Track number 5 is called First Episode at Hyenton. We're not sure where Hyenton is actually and whether any such place exists, but this is Bernie's song about a young man looking back on his schoolboy romance with a woman called Valerie. Bernie was in Lincolnshire in the UK at the time. And what's happened is that Valerie has moved away and has grown up. Possibly this surrounded his first intimate experience, we don't know. But there's some absolutely beautifully sensitive lyrics on this. I was one as you were one, and we were two so mad in love forever. And Elton has given this a really sensitive and lovely setting. Let's just hear a bit of the vocal here.
I was one as you were one, we were two so much in love forever. I love the white socks that you wore, but you don't wear white socks no more.
That's just fantastic, isn't it? This is really high quality songwriting. There's gentle piano, there's a melancholic vocal. It's a gorgeous love song. There's a key change for the refrain. Sometimes these work, sometimes they don't. I happen to like this one. And wouldn't this be a great track to hear live again? He never did it in those concerts he did with full orchestral backing, but wouldn't this have been a great choice for that? And it sounds to me just a little bit like something that you would hear on the Friends soundtrack. If you've heard some things like Michelle's song and the title track, it's in the same sort of vein as those. Now, there's just a little bit of a weird thing going on towards the end. There's kind of an alien sound comes in on the word quadrangle.
Quadrangle sang to the sun, and the greatest of our feeling.
It sounds like an alien spaceship has landed in that. It just seems a little bit odd compared with the rest of the setting there. Still, it's a lovely song, this. Maybe just slightly overlong, but I would rate this as a very good Elton John song, and I hope you like it as well. 7 out of 10. So that's the end of the first side of vinyl, and we've got 33 marks there for the first 5 songs. That's a really good score for a side of Elton vinyl. Let's see what happens on side 2. It starts like this. Now, that's not some bees that are loose in the room here. That's the string introduction to 60 Years On. Now, was this kind of another version or an answer to When I'm 64 by the Beatles? Possibly. It's a story about the loneliness of old age. I've always been slightly confused about this. Who'll walk me down to church when I'm 60 years of age? Okay, when I'm 60. But the song is about 60 years on from when you're singing. So you wouldn't be 60 then, because otherwise you'd be like 0 when you're singing. So that's a little bit of a confusing element for me. I would compare this to the song Talking Old Soldiers on the Tumbleweed Connection album, which is one of my favourite songs, got to say. It's about a veteran who has fought in an unknown war Most of his friends now have gone. He's losing his faith. His dog is dead. And he's just reflecting on, well, who's going to look after me in my old age? Listen to these wonderful lyrics from Bernie. You've hung up your greatcoat and you've laid down your pain. Well, that was a good day at the office for Bernie, wasn't it? Coming up with things like that. Now, the question on this one is the orchestral backing. Is it a little bit overblown? Is it a little bit over dramatic? Does it actually interrupt the flow of what is quite a charming and lovely song? To me, a little bit of a reflection here of the Beatles' A Day in the Life, and that goes into that sort of extreme orchestral moment, doesn't it? As is this one, I think. And for me, it's just a little bit overladen with orchestral influence in this, and it could have been pared back a little bit more. Fantastic vocal range from Elton. But when you re-listen to this and you hear the long setting for it, including the introduction, it does grate just a little bit, and I would like a simpler version. Maybe there's a good piano demo of this one out there. In fact, I'm sure there is. Anyway, still a good song, of course, and because it's good, it gets 6 out of 10. Song number 7 is Border Song. This was the first single from the album. It didn't chart in the UK. It's got very much a gospel influence and went on to be covered by Aretha Franklin. Well, what a tribute that is to have a song of yours covered by her. So we've got a choir in the background giving us that gospel feel. Now, Bernie was asked, well, what's this about? And he said, it's not about anything. Well, it must have been about something, surely. And it does come out as a plea for peace, a plea for tolerance, and a plea for those sort of noble values of respecting others. Elton said it's about Bernie's sense of alienation while he was in London. Or a homily against bigotry. Well, those are two, that's a good sentiment as well, isn't it? The last verse, apparently, Let Us Live in Peace, was written by Elton himself, and he hasn't written many lyrics, has he? So that's quite a thing of note. It's got a piano and vocal start. What do those opening lines mean? Holy Moses, I have been removed. Is that about alienation, possibly? Then we've got some layered production with the orchestra, and then the orchestra and the choir comes in, so it builds up really nicely. It's a fine setting. Melody and harmony work together, and it's an easy and comfortable listen with a good message. And it ends like an anthem for peace. So I really like this song, and we're going to give it a very good rating of 7 out of 10. Very good. Track number 8 is a simple song, but beautiful as well. And the ballads are really strong on this album, aren't they? This is The Greatest Discovery. It's about the birth of Bernie's younger brother and that moment when he woke up and discovered there was a new life in the house, and went across the landing and found this room in which this child, this baby, was sleeping. The whole thing is a bit like a lullaby. It's sweet but sophisticated. Listen to this. A strange new sound you've never heard before. A strange new sound that makes boys explore. We've got a cello and a harp in the introduction. Possibly a little bit too much orchestration again, maybe. That's perhaps a common element in some of these tracks on here. A very soft vocal coming in. The words paint a picture. Possibly it's a bit wordy, a bit of a kind of a teenager's naive poem feel to it in a way. But maybe that's what Bernie was looking for, because it's a young person discovering their brother. So it can get a little bit elaborate on the word side, maybe, but it's still a pleasant listen, this one. And it's a good track for me, 6 out of 10. Now, track number 9 sees us in surreal territory again, because it's The Cage. This is another of Bernie's lyrics which appear to not have any meaning today, possibly influenced by, as we said, that science fiction background at the time. It's been described as a dungeon of human nature by Elizabeth Rosenthal in her book about Elton. And the lyrics start, have you ever lived in a cage where you live to be whipped and to be tamed? Well, have you? I don't know. Perhaps some people have. Anyway, what does this all mean? Nobody seems to know. There's some forceful, exciting piano going on. Elton's using quite a harsh rock and roll voice in there, and he really rips into the vocal. There's quite an exciting electronic keyboard interlude, which, if you notice and listen very carefully to that, sounds just a little bit like Funeral for a Friend, the beginning to Funeral for a Friend. It's the same instrument, and maybe that's something that Elton liked and picked up again later on in his career. For me, it's not a particular favourite of mine. It's okay. I think it would work quite well as a live track. For me, it's one of the weaker songs on the album. I'm going to rate it as an average track for me and give it 4 out of 10. Track number 10 starts like this. And it's called The King Must Die. This is a theatrical, dramatic and powerful song. Some people have suggested it's about the death of Martin Luther King, although Bernie has denied this. It could even be about the assassination plots of Julius Caesar, or perhaps bringing in all these ideas of leaders being assassinated. It's in a minor key. It's talking about secret plans, the betrayal of trust, the monarch feeling alone, with lines like, and sooner or later, everybody's kingdom must end. There's some spine-tingling moments in it, including this one. Incredibly dramatic, isn't it, that? There's a super strong vocal in here. There's a storming bass line. And the whole thing is really powerful and dramatically delivered by Elton. So it's a fine end to the album, this one, I think. And if you don't know that track, give it a listen. It's probably one we don't hear performed live. But for me, that's a very good song. And I'm going to give that one 7 out of 10. The second side of the album gets 30 marks, giving us a total of 63 for those 10 tracks, giving us an average of 6.3 marks per track on the album. And let's see how that compares with the other albums I've reviewed. Just a note before then that there are 4 B-sides and bonus tracks, and I'm going to deal with those in a separate video so things don't get too long here. So let's have a look at my best rated song so far, and there is the entry at number 3, Your Song, coming in there with 10 marks out of 10. Only 2 others on 10, Skyline Pigeon piano version and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. But the album very well represented in the upper mid-range there, with 7 out of 10 for First Episode, Border Song and The King Must Die. Very solid scoring indeed. Now, 240 songs reviewed so far. Right down at the bottom there, Solar Prestige, Agamon and Passengers. The only 2 songs I think I'm going to be giving 0 marks to. So let's see how the albums stack up. And the Elton John album, with 6.3 per track, comes in for me at 4th place. We have Goodbye Yellow Brick Road still at the top, Don't Shoot Me, Madman, and then the Elton John album. And for me, I think that's a pretty fair reflection of my favourite 4 albums reviewed so far. Other views are valid, of course, and you may completely disagree. I know lots of people do. That's fair enough. Well, thanks for watching as ever. Please tell me your favourite track on this album. Subscribe if you want to. Feel free to disagree. For me, this is a really extremely accomplished early album for Elton. It's the one that set him on his way. We know he changed after that, and each album has a slightly different feel to it. But I think this is a beautiful album. I like the use of the orchestra, but I'm glad in a way that he dispensed with the orchestra after a while and made the band smaller and a bit tighter. But still, some really fine songwriting on this one. And if you don't know the album, please give it a listen. Okay, there'll be more videos coming up, including the B-sides and my other series on Elton's hidden gems. See you next time, and don't forget, we're still standing.